So here's an image where I have already created the curves layer that corrects the warm, cool issues with this image, brightens it up, warms up the hues significantly. But we still have areas of the photograph where there are some significant red tones to the skin that are a little bit unpleasant. So I'm going to create a hue saturation adjustment layer, and I'm going to try to show you guys how to focus in specifically on these reds in the cheeks with a kind of a fake selection technique with hue saturation. So I'll come over here to my adjustments panel, click on hue saturation, and I'm going to go specifically into the reds because of course that's where this information most likely is going to exist. And then I'm going to make my selection. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to focus in on the area of color that is actually going to be affected by this adjustment. So I want to be able to see the area of color that is going to be manipulated. In order to do that, I've gone into the reds. I'm going to just crank the hue all the way to the left. Now you can see that there's a pretty significant change in color in the image. And all this represents is, at this point, because I am going to change that back, what this represents is what areas of the photograph are actually going to be manipulated. So I'm going to now use the eyedroppers and these sliders to fine-tune which areas of the image I want to affect. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to use the minus dropper. I'm just going to click and decrease the areas of color that this is going to manipulate. And you can see it's really effective. What I've done now, if you look at the sliders again, these areas of the slider are narrower, indicating that I am now affecting a smaller area of the spectrum of color. Less color is being affected by this adjustment. So I've decreased the color spectrum that is being affected. Now I'm going to play with it just a little bit more. Now that I have the color pretty much where I want it, I'm going to change this back to 0. And now I'm going to play with the saturation and the lightness. So I can decrease the saturation. You can see that that made the reds go down. I can increase the lightness. That also makes the reds go down. And now I can kind of play with the hue a little bit as well. And if you can see when I go to the right here, just kind of +5, it warms up the hues a little bit. Okay. So I'm going to click, actually I don't have to click OK because it's an adjustment layer. Now one of the things, as we toggle the visibility back and forth, you can see that happened. You know, the red is gone. It may have gone a little bit too far, it's a little bit too cool. But the red of the lips has essentially been desaturated as well. Now we don't want that, and that's of course where the layer mask is going to come in. So all we have to do is grab our brush, make it an appropriate size, ensure that we have black, and then just paint in on the layer mask to make sure that that layer adjustment layer does not affect that area of color. And now, as you can see here, pretty successful color correction. Maybe a little bit too warm, a little bit too bright, but fairly successful. And that's the hue saturation method for removing red from faces. Now, as it says in the lecture, don't get caught up in just red. Of course, we can do this with any area of color that we'd like, and there's other types of color issues that we could positively impact with a photograph with using this method, with zeroing in on a particular spectrum and then editing only that particular spectrum.